Sometimes everything goes well and life feels great, but sometimes it's just terrible. 2023 has been a great year for me. I now get to do what I love for a living, but most importantly, I'm working on my dream project. So let me tell you the story of how I got my license degree as a game developer. Why is it so hard? Why do people fail in achieving their dreams? But before we get into that, we'll have to go back to January of 2018. Well, in 2018, Fortnite Battle Royale was huge, and I was spending all my time playing that game. One day, as I launched the Epic Games Store, I saw something called Unreal Engine. I searched the internet to find out what that's about, and I got intrigued by YouTubers discussing its capabilities, so I decided I should give it a try. In that exact moment, I remembered where it all started. I was born and raised in Romania. In the early years of democratic Romania, it was almost impossible getting your hands on electronic devices. Just like most Romanians, I wasn't doing too great at the time, so all I had was an old computer. That's why, as a kid, I couldn't understand why big companies didn't make their games work on affordable computers. I thought they were just being mean and didn't want us Romanian kids enjoy video games, so I decided I'm gonna change that. But I was just 10 years old at the time, not much I could do. I grew up playing video games, and I love titles like Mortal Kombat, GTA, Wolfenstein. I've always been fascinated by video game graphics, how characters can dance or how my keyboard can move something on the screen. I wanted to know more. I first came in touch with programming at about 14 years old. Back then, I took a logic test which got me accepted at a free programming course held by some local professors. They introduced me to C++, which was a nightmare, but I quickly became very good at it. I learned how to solve tough problems, and I even participated in coding competitions, but I could never forget about the dream of having my own video game. My first thought was that I could try to make some games using C++ by writing in the console. They were not much fun, but hey, I was now living my dream. However, it did not take long for me to realize that moving things in a console is not a AAA, so I decided to get better by searching on Google. That's tough, and I quit game development for the next 3 years. This brings me back to January of 2018, when I realized that it was possible to build games outside of the console by using this thing called an engine. So let's go. I installed Unreal Engine 4, I opened the project, I searched for tutorials, and I quickly realized game development is insanely tough. The gap between a game idea and a finalized product is enormous. I didn't know where to start, I didn't know what to learn, it was impossible. So after some days of fiddling with Unreal Engine, I decided to throw it away. Days passed by, and I knew I had to look more into game development now that I knew game engines exist. I decided to open the internet once again, and I discovered Unity. At that time, Unity had a great community, a well-written documentation, and this guy was huge. I took on some tutorials, I learned a bunch of stuff, and then I felt ready to take on my next challenge, my first game. This is when I once again realized game development is insanely tough. Even though I was fairly good at algorithmics, my knowledge about object-oriented programming and C# itself was bad, so I decided to quit game development for another 2 years. I started my bachelor's degree study in Bucharest, which I wanted to quit from the first day. I was learning a lot, I made great friends, I was having fun, but I could never forget what my true passion was. When the pandemic began, I had to start studying from home, and that's when I knew I had to leave university in second place and start working on my dream. I didn't believe it was worth continuing my studies. I thought I already knew everything I needed. Now being much better at programming, I started learning a lot, completing course after course, staying at the computer all day, all night, until I felt like I was ready to start my very first project. I named it Town Attack, and it was about defending your town from goblins and upgrading it. I had a ton of ideas. You could explore the world, you could have boss fights, go to other worlds, hire defenders, make archer towers, and I really believed in this project. I bought all the assets as I was never an art guy, and I challenged myself to complete the game in 3 months. I managed to do it in 8 months of full-time working and learning. Now I was only a step away from making it. I went through the publishing process, I made sure everything was in place, and voila! I now had it. My game was published on Android and App Store so people could play it. My dream became true. Do you remember me telling you, sometimes it's just terrible? It just so happens that in life you go from being very happy to being miserable. The game didn't even make enough to cover a bunch of sprites, it basically made nothing. I kept updating it, fixing bugs, I even added a dungeon mode. Nothing seemed to work, the reasons varying from a very small amount of marketing to a poor design, maybe not knowing anything about mobile games. But it was over. It was simply not fun and I couldn't get any feedback because no one actually downloaded the game, even my friends hated it. This happened in 2022. It was very tough, but I had to give up on that project. And then things got very bad. Because I have worked for the past 1 year at my game, I have failed every single university exam, I had no money to pay my rent, and my laptop, which I really needed, was doomed. I knew I had to fix things somehow, but I was so mentally disrupted that I could not get out of bed in the morning. I made a stupid mistake and it was entirely my fault. I hated living with that thought. Anyone who has ever looked into the game development industry knows that it is very competitive and unpredictable. That's because you can't foresee if a game which you spend millions on is going to prove itself profitable. If it isn't profitable, you don't know if you're going to make it for another development cycle. That's why game development jobs are hard to find, they usually require a lot of experience and the salaries are crap. But I gave it a shot and some guys who got impressed by the story of my game offered me a job at a small indie studio. I was very excited for this opportunity. It proved that all of my work hasn't been done for nothing and that there's future for me in this industry. So I started this new job and I've met a bunch of cool people and I worked on a project which was damn huge for me. But what I really cared about is that I could pay my rent and maybe save money for a new computer so I can finish my studies. What I realized during the time spent at that studio is that I didn't get into game development because of the love for programming games. I didn't even get into game development because I'm good at making sounds. It's all because when I made my own games, I made my own world. Anything that happens in a game is because I imagined it in that way. It's the most immersive form of art someone can create. It's visuals, audio, game experience, story, emotion, and it feels amazing sticking all these things together to make an experience which other people can enjoy. Working for a small studio was fine, but it was all about implementing a technical thing fast and getting into another technical thing. It wasn't that much fun anymore, it actually made me hate the thing that I love to do. And it didn't even last for long, as I got laid off in just 3 months because the studio was going through some tough times. In the meanwhile, things got really bad in tech, and companies did almost no hiring. I tried applying for a lot of jobs, but it seemed useless, I couldn't get any interviews. At this point, nothing could get worse. My parents didn't know anything about this. I didn't want them to suffer with me. But I was also on the streets with no job and no laptop and having to pass about 6 exams which I didn't attend. That's when I understood that depression is a thing. My only solution was to knock at a good friend's door and move into his place for a small period of time. I am not exaggerating when I say I did not move from bed for 2 weeks. I was scrolling TikTok for hours and hours. To be precise, about 17 hours a day, and I could barely sleep for an hour or 2. I lost about 10 kilograms in that small period of time because I could not eat anything and I didn't want anyone to help me. I had no hope and I just wanted to be left alone. Around that time, I had a dream. I saw myself happy, doing things I always enjoyed doing. I saw people that I loved being proud of me. So I woke up crying and I went straight to the mirror. I looked myself in the eyes and I knew there was no more time left. I wanted to make a change. Right at that moment, I took on my shoes and I went for a run. And I ran all morning. Every stop I made, I thought about it more and more. I thought about every possibility I had and I came up with a plan. So my friend was working during the day. Because of this, I could use his computer to learn while he was away and while he slept. My idea was that I could leverage my good algorithmic skills to nail an interview, so instead of 17 hours a day of TikTok, I moved to 17 hours a day of HackerRank, continuously solving problems and learning. The other issue was that, even though I was very well prepared for interviews, I wouldn't get called by anyone because I had little to no experience. So I pulled another trick from my sleeve, and all of a sudden, I had 5 times more experience with 2 clicks. The phone started pouring like there was no crisis. Pro tip, everyone is looking for talented people. If no one calls, it's you. After taking a bunch of interviews, I ended up with 2 offers. Offer 1, Unity game developer. Offer 2, software engineer in fintech, and it was C++. The dream was back in my hands, and I'm sure there is no surprise for you that I chose the C++ software engineer in fintech. I lied, this should be a surprise, but I chose this after thinking about it for a couple of days. I will always want to make games, and that's what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Even though it's so hard making a living from this, it's one of those things I can do without getting paid. The reason I turned down a job offer at a big game studio is I didn't want to kill my love of making games. I worked for a studio, I didn't like it, and I'm not going back there. Now, you're probably asking yourselves what I did with my studies. Thing is, after I got this new job, I could afford to pay rent and I bought myself a new computer. But the most important thing is that from that morning I never stopped working. I managed to go to my new job and I passed those exams at the same time with the help of my colleagues and by not sleeping for several nights. It was very fun. If you want to hear a story about that, leave it down in the comments section, you will laugh, I promise. So this video is about me getting my license degree. So how does that even work and what does it have to do with my games passion? Well, in the university that I attended, after you pass all exams, you have to support a thesis. To do this, you have to be accepted and coordinated by a professor. Even though I started working in fintech, I still wanted to create games and publish them, so I asked myself, what if I can find a professor who will accept one of my game ideas as a thesis? And that's what I did. I got in contact with someone who had a game development course and he accepted this title. Study on the development and publication of a game on mobile platforms. In about 2 weeks, I put together a cool prototype, a SEO study, some sounds, some 3D models, some marketing ideas, and 60 pages later I got a maximum grade, which is a 10. And that was it. I finished my studies with a maximum grade and it doesn't end here. 1 year later, that prototype turned into a great game which I'm very proud of and I will soon publish. If you want to see the game that I'm now working on, maybe some development tips, other cool stories, leave a comment down below. I will read all of them. My advice for you is to keep on doing what you love. It may be hard or even cruel sometimes. You may feel like giving up and focusing on something else, but I promise, if there's a thing that you can become great at, it's the thing that you love. And being great at something is what brings great things to your life. So get out of your bed and start doing something now, because it may be too late one day.